Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars through the main viewing window. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he didn't notice. Today was the day that would change everything for humanity. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the Zeltharian fleet," said Communications Officer Lisa Wang from her station. "They're confirming the meeting time and location." Jake nodded slowly. 6 months of careful negotiations had led to this moment. Humanity was about to make face-to-face contact with their first alien civilization. The Zeltharians had found Earth's radio signals 3 years ago and had been watching humanity ever since. Now, finally, they were ready to meet. "Any word from Lieutenant Collins?" Jake asked. "She's still in the cultural briefing room with the diplomatic team," Lisa replied. She asked not to be disturbed unless it was urgent. Jake understood why Amy Collins was so focused. As the ship's expert on alien cultures, everything depended on her research. The Zeltharians had sent detailed information about their customs and traditions. One wrong move, one cultural mistake, and humanity might lose their chance to join the galactic community. The door to the bridge opened and Amy Collins walked in carrying a thick tablet full of notes. She looked tired, but determined. Behind her came Ben Harper, the cultural attaché who had joined the mission at the last minute. Ben was different from the rest of the crew. While everyone else was military or scientific, Ben had spent years working with troubled kids in Detroit. The mission commanders thought his experience with difficult communication might be useful. "Captain, we need to go over the meeting protocol one more time," Amy said, setting her tablet on the navigation console. The Zeltharians take their ceremonies very seriously. Their entire society is built around following proper procedures. Jake gathered his senior officers around the console. "Tell us what we need to know." Amy pulled up a holographic display showing the meeting chamber that had been prepared in space between the two fleets. "The ceremony has 7 distinct phases. First, we enter from the east side of the chamber, while they enter from the west. We must not make eye contact until the 3rd phase." "Why not?" asked Security Chief Tom Brady. "In their culture, looking at someone before the proper introduction is like claiming you own them. It's considered very rude," Amy explained. "In the 2nd phase, we perform the greeting sequence. 3 bows, each held for exactly 5 seconds. Then we speak the traditional welcome words in their language." Ben raised his hand. "What if we mess up the pronunciation?" "We can't mess up," Amy said firmly. "I've been practicing for months. The translation software has been checked and double-checked. Everything has to be perfect." Jake studied the holographic display. The meeting chamber looked like a fancy ballroom, with specific positions marked for each person. "What happens in the other phases?" "Phase 3 is the formal introduction. We state our names, ranks, and intentions. Phase 4 is the gift exchange. We give them samples of Earth culture, music, art, literature. Phase 5 is their response. Phase 6 is the formal acceptance of friendship, and Phase 7 is the closing ceremony." "How long will all this take?" Tom asked. "About 2 hours," Amy replied. "Maybe longer if they want to examine our gifts carefully." Ben looked uncomfortable. "This seems awfully complicated. What if something goes wrong?" Amy's expression grew serious. "Nothing can go wrong, Ben. The Zeltharians have been watching us for 3 years. They're deciding whether humanity is mature enough to join the galactic community. Other alien races are watching too. If we fail this ceremony, we might never get another chance." Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "What do we know about their representative?" "Her name is Kira Velthane," Amy said, pulling up another display. "She's young for a Zeltharian diplomat, probably equivalent to someone in their 20s. This is likely her first major assignment. Her family has been involved in galactic diplomacy for generations." The display showed an image of a tall, graceful being with pale blue skin that seemed to shift to silver in different light. Her eyes were large and dark and her hair moved like it was underwater. She wore flowing robes covered in tiny lights that pulsed slowly. "Those lights on her clothes," Ben said, pointing at the display. "What do they mean?" They're bioluminescent fibers that respond to her emotions, Amy explained. Blue means calm, green means curious, red means angry or upset. It's like wearing your feelings on your sleeve, except it's involuntary. So we'll know if we're making her upset, Jake observed. Exactly. But we also need to control our own emotions. Zeltharians can sense strong human emotions, especially negative ones like fear or anger. We need to stay calm and confident throughout the ceremony. The bridge's communication system buzzed. Captain Morrison to the briefing room, came the voice of Admiral Sarah Foster from Earth Command. We have final instructions from home. Jake looked at his team. Amy, I want you to run through the ceremony one more time with everyone who's going to the meeting. Ben, Tom, you're with me. As they walked to the briefing room, Ben seemed nervous. Captain, what if the Zeltharians don't like humans? What if we're too different? Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Jake replied. But Amy's research suggests they're genuinely interested in peaceful contact. They could have destroyed our radio signals or invaded Earth if they wanted to harm us. Instead, they chose to talk. Still, Tom added, we need to be ready for anything. My security team will be monitoring the meeting chamber from our ship. The briefing room was filled with the soft blue glow of holographic displays showing star charts and communication logs. Admiral Foster's image appeared on the main screen, her gray hair pulled back and her expression serious. Captain Morrison, the eyes of humanity are on you today, she said. The President and the United Nations are watching. The scientific community is holding its breath. Don't let us down. We won't, Admiral, Jake replied. Remember, this isn't just about making friends with one alien race. The Zeltharians are members of something called the Galactic Council. If they accept us, we'll have access to technologies and knowledge that could solve every problem on Earth. If they reject us... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood what was at stake. The ceremony begins in 3 hours, Jake announced to his crew. Let's make history. Outside the ship, space was filled with vessels from both fleets. The human ships looked rough and industrial compared to the smooth, crystal-like Zeltharian vessels. Soon, representatives from both civilizations would meet in the small chamber floating between them. Everything depended on following the rules perfectly. Everything depended on not making any mistakes. No one suspected that the biggest breakthrough would come from breaking every rule they had learned. The shuttle bay of the Horizon's Edge buzzed with activity as the diplomatic team prepared for departure. Captain Jake Morrison adjusted his formal dress uniform one last time, checking that every button and badge was in perfect position. The Zeltharians had specifically requested that humans wear their most ceremonial clothing to show respect for the occasion. Lieutenant Amy Collins stood nearby, quietly practicing the Zeltharian greeting phrases under her breath. Her tablet displayed the phonetic pronunciations, and she mouthed each word carefully. She had memorized every gesture, every timing requirement, every possible response the aliens might give. Velthek Moran Zehai, she whispered, practicing, the opening words that meant we come in peaceful purpose. Ben Harper fidgeted with his collar. Unlike the others, he didn't have a military dress uniform. Instead, he wore the best civilian formal wear the ship could provide, a simple black suit that made him look more like he was going to a wedding than making first contact with aliens. You ready for this, Ben? Jake asked. Ben shrugged. As ready as anyone can be for something that's never happened before in human history, I guess. Remember, Amy said, looking up from her tablet, no sudden movements, no touching, and absolutely no interrupting during their speeches. Zeltharians consider interruption to be a sign of disrespect that can end negotiations immediately. The shuttle that would carry them to the meeting chamber was small, but equipped with the best technology humanity had to offer. As they boarded, Jake felt the weight of representing his entire species. Every human who had ever lived, and every human yet to be born, would be affected by what happened in the next few hours. The flight to the neutral meeting chamber took only 10 minutes, but it felt much longer. Through the shuttle's windows, they could see the Zeltharian ships arranged in perfect formation. Each vessel was shaped like a crystal, smooth and reflecting the light of nearby stars. The ships seemed to pulse with their own inner light, beautiful and mysterious. "Look at that," Ben said, pointing at the largest Zeltharian vessel. "It's like someone carved it from a single piece of diamond." "Their technology is at least 1,000 years ahead of ours," Amy explained. "Those ships can travel between star systems in days instead of years. They can create artificial gravity, manipulate matter at the molecular level, and communicate instantly across galactic distances." "And if this meeting goes well," Jake added, "they might share some of that knowledge with us." The meeting chamber came into view, a transparent sphere about the size of a small building floating in space between the two fleets. Inside, Jake could see the carefully arranged furniture and decorations that matched the specifications Amy had received from the Zeltharians. "There's their shuttle." Amy pointed to a sleek vessel approaching from the other direction. It moved, without any visible engines or exhaust, gliding silently through space like a fish swimming through water. As their shuttles docked on opposite sides of the chamber, Jake felt his heart rate increase. "This is it, people. Remember everything we practiced." They entered the chamber through an airlock that sealed behind them. The interior was exactly as Amy had described. Elegant furniture arranged in specific patterns, soft lighting, and breathable atmosphere maintained by alien technology. Everything was designed to make both species comfortable while following Zeltharian protocol. Jake, Amy, and Ben took their positions on the east side of the chamber, just as they had practiced. They stood at attention, eyes focused straight ahead, not looking toward the west entrance where the Zeltharians would appear. The wait felt endless. Jake could hear his own breathing and the soft hum of the chamber's life support systems. Then, with a barely audible whisper of air, the west airlock opened. The Zeltharians entered in single file, moving with a grace that seemed almost like dancing. Their leader, Kira Velthane, was smaller than Jake had expected but carried herself with obvious dignity. Her bioluminescent robes pulsed with steady blue light, indicating calmness and control. Behind her came two advisors, both older and wearing robes with more complex light patterns. They moved to their assigned positions and stood perfectly still, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Jake counted slowly to 10, just as Amy had instructed, then began the first phase. He and his team performed the 3 ritual bows, each held for exactly 5 seconds. The Zeltharians responded with their own bowing sequence, which involved hand gestures that looked like they were weaving invisible threads in the air. Phase 2 went smoothly. Amy spoke the traditional greeting words with perfect pronunciation, and Kira Velthane responded in accented but understandable English. Her voice was musical, with overtones that seemed to come from somewhere other than her throat. "We welcome the humans to this place of meeting," she said, her bioluminescent fibers glowing slightly brighter. "May understanding flow between our peoples like water between rivers." Phase 3 was the formal introductions. Jake stated his name, rank, and purpose clearly. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge. I speak for the United Nations of Earth and for all humanity in seeking friendship with the Zeltharian Empire." Amy and Ben introduced themselves in turn, following the exact format they had practiced. The Zeltharians responded with their own introductions, which included not only their names but also their family lineages going back several generations. Phase 4 was the gift exchange. Amy presented a carefully selected collection of human culture, recordings of Bach and Mozart, digital art from throughout human history, and literature translated into Zeltharian language. Kira Velthane accepted the gifts with formal grace and presented the humans with a crystalline device that contained Zeltharian music and poetry. Everything was going perfectly. Jake began to relax slightly, thinking that maybe they would succeed after all. Then came Phase 5, and everything went wrong. Kira Velthane began to speak about the formal acceptance of friendship between their peoples. She used a complex Zeltharian phrase that Amy had studied extensively. But something was wrong with the translation software. Instead of hearing the proper human equivalent, the software translated her words as, "The human offspring shall serve the Zeltharian Empire as we claim dominion over your breeding rights." Amy's face went white. Jake felt his stomach drop. The translation was clearly wrong, but Kira Velthane was waiting for their response, and any delay would be interpreted as rejection of her offer. The bioluminescent fibers on Kiravel Thane's robes began to shift from blue to yellow, indicating confusion. She had expected an immediate positive response to what she thought was a generous offer of friendship. Jake looked at Amy desperately. She was frantically working with her tablet, trying to figure out what had gone wrong with the translation. Her hands were shaking as she scrolled through language files and pronunciation guides. "Captain," she whispered urgently, "the translation matrix has corrupted somehow. I don't know what she actually said, but it definitely wasn't what we heard." Kiravel Thane's advisors were beginning to look agitated. The yellow glow from their robes was shifting toward orange, which Amy had said indicated displeasure. In Zeltharian culture, a delayed response to a formal offer was considered deeply insulting. "Can you fix it?" Jake whispered back. "I'm trying, but the backup systems are showing the same error. We need more time." But time was something they didn't have. The orange glow from the Zeltharian delegation was getting brighter, and Jake could see Kira Velthane's expression changing from confusion to hurt to anger. The first meeting between humans and aliens was about to become a diplomatic disaster, and Jake had no idea how to stop it. The tension in the meeting chamber grew thicker with each passing second. Kira Velthane's bioluminescent robes had shifted from orange to a deep red that pulsed like an angry heartbeat. Her dark eyes, which had been warm and curious moments before, now held a mixture of confusion and growing offense. Captain Jake Morrison felt sweat forming on his forehead, despite the chamber's perfect temperature control. Lieutenant Amy Collins continued frantically working with her tablet, her fingers flying over the controls as she tried to fix the translation error. The backup systems kept showing the same impossible result, that the young Zeltharian diplomat had somehow offered to enslave humanity. "Captain," Amy whispered desperately, "I need at least 5 more minutes to rebuild the translation matrix from scratch." But Jake could see they didn't have 5 minutes. Maybe they didn't even have 1 minute. The Zeltharian advisors behind Kiravel Thane were whispering urgently to each other in their musical language. Their robes now glowed with warning colors that Amy had described as the prelude to ending negotiations permanently. Kiravel Thane herself stood frozen in the traditional pose for receiving a response, but her expression was changing from hurt to anger. In her culture, the long delay could only mean one thing. The humans were rejecting her offer of friendship with deliberate insult. Jake's mind raced through options. He could try to explain the technical problem, but that would require breaking protocol and speaking out of turn. He could attempt to give a response based on what he guessed she had actually said, but if he was wrong, he might make things even worse. While Jake and Amy struggled with the crisis, Ben Harper stood quietly, to one side, watching the young alien girl with different eyes. He wasn't thinking about diplomatic protocols or translation matrices. Instead, he was seeing something his years of working with troubled kids had taught him to recognize. Beneath Kira Velthane's formal diplomatic mask, Ben saw fear. She was young, probably on her first major assignment. Her family's reputation for diplomatic success was riding on this meeting. She had followed every rule, performed every gesture perfectly, offered what she believed was a generous gift of friendship to humanity. And now the humans were rejecting her with silence. Ben watched as her shoulders tensed slightly, as her hands clenched just a little tighter at her sides. He saw the way her bioluminescent fibers flickered with uncertainty beneath the angry, red glow. This wasn't just about diplomatic protocol anymore. This was about a scared young person who thought she was failing at the most important task of her life. The Zeltharian advisors were beginning to move toward their leader, clearly, preparing to end the meeting and declare the negotiations a failure. Once they made that decision, Ben knew there would be no second chances. Humanity would be marked as too primitive and unpredictable for galactic society. That's when Ben Harper made a decision that would change the course of history. He stepped forward, completely abandoning his assigned position in the ceremony. Amy looked up from her tablet in horror, and Jake's mouth opened to stop him, but Ben was already moving. "Ben, no," Amy hissed. "You'll violate every protocol." But Ben wasn't thinking about protocols anymore. He was thinking about a frightened young person who needed to know that someone understood her fear. Kira Velthane's eyes widened as the human male approached her directly. In her culture, such a breach of ceremony was almost unthinkable. Her advisors immediately stepped forward, their hands moving toward the ceremonial weapons they carried. The bioluminescent patterns on their robes flared bright red in alarm. Ben ignored the weapons, ignored the shocked gasps from both sides, ignored every rule he had been taught about first contact protocol. He walked straight up to Kira Velthane and saw up close what others had missed. She wasn't just angry. She was terrified. Her large, dark eyes were wide with fear, not rage. Her bioluminescent fibers weren't just showing anger. They were showing the rapid, flickering patterns that Amy had mentioned indicated panic. This young diplomat thought she had destroyed the most important mission in her people's recent history. "Hey," Ben said softly, his voice gentle and calm. "It's okay. We're not rejecting you." Kira Velthane stared at him in shock. No one had ever spoken to her so directly during a formal ceremony. The casual warmth in his voice was completely outside her experience of diplomatic contact. Before anyone could stop him, before he could think about the consequences, Ben did something that violated every rule of Zeltharian culture and human diplomatic protocol. He hugged her. Ben stepped forward and wrapped his arms around the alien girl in a gentle, comforting embrace. It was the same kind of hug he had given to countless scared kids in Detroit. Warm, protective, and completely unconditional. The reaction was immediate and electric. Kira Velthane gasped, her bioluminescent fibers suddenly shifting from angry, red to colors no one in the chamber had ever seen before. Golden light spread across her robes like sunrise, mixed with soft purples and gentle greens that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Her advisors stood frozen, their hands still on their weapons but their faces showing complete bewilderment. In thousands of years of Zeltharian history, no one had ever done anything like this during a formal ceremony. Jake and Amy watched in stunned silence as Ben held the young alien girl, one hand gently patting her back in the universal gesture of comfort. They expected to see her pull away in horror, expected her guards to attack, expected the diplomatic disaster to reach new depths. Instead, something miraculous happened. Kira Velthane's tense shoulders relaxed. The fear in her eyes was replaced by wonder. Her bioluminescent fibers continued to glow with warm, golden light that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. For the first time in her life, she was experiencing something her highly structured society had never taught her about. Genuine human compassion offered without agenda, without ceremony, without any expectation of return. "The translation system had an error," Ben said quietly, still holding her. "We weren't rejecting you. We were just confused and scared, just like you are." Kira Velthane found herself relaxing into the embrace, her bioluminescent display showing emotions she didn't even have names for. The human's warmth was unlike anything in her experience. It asked for nothing, demanded no protocol, required no formal response. It was simply offered, freely and kindly, because she needed it. I do not understand," she whispered, her musical voice barely audible. This is not how these meetings are supposed to proceed." Ben smiled gently and slowly released her, though he kept his hands on her shoulders in a gesture of continued support. "Maybe that's the problem," he said. "Maybe we've been so worried about following rules that we forgot about just being kind to each other." The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. 2 fleets of ships waited in space around them. The future of human civilization hung in the balance, and in the center of it all, a scared young alien girl looked at a human man who had chosen compassion over protocol and began to understand that perhaps there was more than one way for species to connect across the stars. The silence in the meeting chamber stretched for what felt like an eternity. Captain Jake Morrison held his breath, watching as Kira Velthane looked up at Ben Harper with an expression of complete wonder. Her bioluminescent robes continued to glow with warm golden light, colors that her advisors had never seen before in all their years of diplomatic service. One of the Zeltharian advisors, an elderly male with intricate silver patterns on his robes, finally found his voice, Kira Velthane, he said in their musical language, what is the meaning of this display? Your bioluminescence shows patterns that are not in any of our cultural guides. Kira Velthane looked at her advisor, then back at Ben, her dark eyes still wide with amazement. I do not know, she replied, switching to English so the humans could understand. I have never felt anything like this before. Lieutenant Amy Collins, still clutching her tablet with the broken translation software, stared at the scene before her. Everything she had studied about first contact protocols was being thrown out the window, yet somehow the situation was improving rather than getting worse. Ben, she whispered urgently, what did you just do? Ben kept his hands gently on Kira Velthane's shoulders, offering her the same steady support he had given to countless frightened children over the years. I did what felt right, he said. Simply. She was scared, and scared people need comfort, not ceremonies. The young Zeltharian diplomat placed one of her hands over Ben's, marveling at the warmth of human skin and the steadiness of his presence. In our culture, she said slowly, physical contact is reserved for family members and the most sacred ceremonies. It requires months of preparation and specific ritual purposes. What about when someone is upset? Ben asked. What do you do? Then? Kira Velthane looked confused by the question. Upset individuals are given time alone to compose themselves. They study the appropriate emotional control techniques and return when they can maintain proper dignity. That sounds lonely, Ben said gently. The words hit Kira Velthane like a physical blow. Lonely. She had never heard that concept applied to their cultural practices before, but suddenly it explained so much about her own experiences growing up in diplomatic society. Yes, she whispered, her bioluminescent fibers shifting to deeper gold mixed with soft blue. It is very lonely. Captain Morrison realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. The formal ceremony had been completely abandoned, but somehow they were making more progress toward real understanding than hours of perfect protocol could have achieved. Kira Velthane, he said carefully, what were you actually trying to say to us when the translation failed? She turned to face him, though she kept one hand resting on Ben's arm as if drawing strength from the contact. I was offering the friendship of the Zeltharian Empire to humanity. It is a formal invitation to join the greater galactic community as equals and partners. Amy quickly worked on her tablet, cross-referencing the proper Zeltharian phrase with her backup language files. Captain, she's right. The translation matrix somehow inverted several key terms. She was offering us friendship, not dominance. Then, why? Asked the elderly Zeltharian advisor. Did the humans delay their response for so long? In our culture, such delay indicates rejection or insult. Jake felt a flush of embarrassment. We were terrified of making a mistake. Our entire species' future depended on following your customs perfectly. When the translation failed, we panicked. Kira Velthane's bioluminescent display shifted to show surprise and understanding. You were afraid? Of us? Of disappointing you? Ben corrected. Of saying or doing the wrong thing and ruining humanity's chance to join the galactic community. The revelation seemed to stun the Zeltharian delegation. They exchanged rapid conversations in their own language, their robes flickering with various colors as they processed this new information. This is most unusual, the advisor said finally. In our experience, species seeking to join the galactic community usually demonstrate their superiority and demand recognition. You are the first to express fear of inadequacy. Maybe that's because we are inadequate, Jake said honestly. Our technology is primitive compared to yours. Our society is chaotic and often violent. We don't even have unified global government, yet. But you have this, Kira Velthane said, looking at Ben with growing amazement. You have the ability to sense emotional distress in others and respond with immediate comfort. You offer kindness to strangers without requiring anything in return. She turned to her advisors, speaking rapidly in Zeltharian. The older aliens listened with growing interest. their bioluminescent displays showing patterns that Amy's cultural training told her indicated deep thought and reconsideration. "What is she telling them?" Jake asked. "I think," Amy said, working quickly with her translation software. "She's explaining how Ben's hug made her feel. She's using words that don't have direct translations, but they seem to relate to emotional warmth and genuine care." The elderly advisor stepped forward, studying Ben with new interest. "Young human, in our culture, we have legends of ancient times when our people could share emotions directly through touch. These abilities were lost thousands of years ago as we developed more sophisticated civilization." "Maybe they weren't lost," Ben suggested. "Maybe they were just set aside in favor of formal rules." Kira Velthane nodded eagerly, her golden glow becoming brighter. "Yes. Ben's touch shared his emotions with me. I felt his concern, his desire to help, his genuine care for my well-being. It was immediate and honest in a way that words cannot be." She looked around the chamber, taking in the carefully arranged furniture and formal positions that had seemed so important an hour ago. All of this ceremony, all of these rules, they create barriers between people instead of connections. "Careful, young one," her advisor warned. "Our traditions exist for important reasons." "I'm not saying we should abandon all traditions," Kira Velthane replied. "But perhaps we should consider whether some of our rules prevent us from truly understanding other species." Jake felt a surge of hope. "Are you saying that humanity's informality might not be a disadvantage?" "I am saying," Kira Velthane said, her bioluminescent display now showing steady golden light mixed with warm greens, "that humanity offers something unique to the galactic community. You have the ability to form genuine emotional connections quickly and naturally. This is not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated." Ben smiled. "Does this mean we passed your test?" "There was no test," the elderly advisor said, though his tone had softened considerably. "The ceremony was meant to determine whether humanity could follow basic galactic protocols. But what we have witnessed here is far more valuable than mere protocol compliance." He paused, looking at his young colleague who was still glowing with colors he had never seen in 70 years of diplomatic service. "Kira Velthane, you will need to make a full report to the Galactic Council about this encounter." "Yes," she said, finally stepping back from Ben, though her expression remained warm and grateful. "And I will recommend that humanity be not only accepted into the galactic community, but that we establish a new type of cultural exchange program." "What kind of program?" Amy asked. Kira Velthane's bioluminescent fibers sparkled with excitement. "One where other species can learn about emotional honesty and direct compassion. Humans may be technologically young, but you have preserved something that many advanced civilizations have forgotten." She looked directly at Ben. "You have reminded us that before we are diplomats or representatives or officials, we are living beings who need kindness and understanding." The formal ceremony lay in ruins around them, but something far more valuable had taken its place. The first real friendship between human and alien had been born not from perfect protocol, but from one person's willingness to offer comfort to another's fear. As they prepared to return to their respective ships, Jake realized that humanity had indeed passed a test today, just not the one they had expected. 6 months after the historic first contact meeting, Ben Harper stood in front of a class unlike any in human history. The classroom was aboard the new Galactic Cultural Exchange Station, a joint project between humanity and 12 different alien species. Instead of desks, the room had cushioned areas designed to accommodate beings of various sizes and body types. His students today included 3 young Zeltharians, 2 crystal-based silicanoids from the Vega system, a gaseous Etherian contained in a mobile atmosphere suit, and 4 lizard-like Draknari whose scales changed color with their emotions much like Zeltharian bioluminescence. "Okay, everyone," Ben said with a smile. "Today we're going to talk about something that might seem strange to some of your cultures, the importance of physical comfort during emotional distress." One of the Zeltharian students, a teenager named Velmore Kane, raised her hand. Her bioluminescent robes showed curious green patterns. Teacher Ben, in our society we are taught that emotional distress should be handled privately. Why do humans believe in involving others? Ben walked over to a comfortable chair and sat down, making himself appear less formal and more approachable. That's a great question, Velmore Kane. Can anyone think of a time when you felt scared or upset and wished someone would help you? The Yao Draknari student named Seth flickered his scales to a thoughtful purple color. When I was small, I broke my family's ceremonial crystal. I hid in the garden for hours, afraid to tell my parents. I felt very alone. What happened when you finally told them? Ben asked. They were angry at first, but then my mother sat with me and explained that accidents happen. She didn't punish me because she could see I was already upset. Seth's scales showed warm orange. I felt much better after talking to her. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Ben said. Your mother offered you comfort when you needed it. She didn't follow formal rules about punishment, she responded to your emotional need. The Etherian student, who communicated through modulated sound waves from their atmosphere suit, buzzed thoughtfully. But Teacher Ben, how do we know when someone needs comfort? In my species, we exist as pure energy most of the time. We don't have physical signs of distress. Ben nodded. That's where learning to really observe others becomes important. Sometimes it's not about physical signs, but about understanding when someone is struggling. He stood up and demonstrated. Let me show you something. Velmore Kane, would you help me with an example? The young Zeltharian approached, her bioluminescent fibers showing slight nervousness at being singled out. I want you to imagine something that would make you worried or scared, Ben said gently. Maybe thinking about failing an important test or disappointing your family. Don't tell us what it is, just think about it. Velmore Kane's robes gradually shifted from green to yellow, then to orange as she followed his instructions. Now, class, what do you observe? Ben asked. Her bioluminescence is changing to warning colors, Seth noted. Her posture is becoming more rigid, added one of the silicanoids, whose crystal body resonated with a lower frequency when concentrating. And if you look closely at her face, Ben said, you can see tension around her eyes, even though she's trying to hide it. Ben approached Velmore Kane slowly. Is it okay if I demonstrate the human response to seeing someone in distress? She nodded, though her orange glow intensified slightly. Ben gently placed a hand on her shoulder, the same way he had comforted Kira Velthane 6 months earlier. Hey, whatever you're thinking about, it's going to be okay. You're not alone. The effect was immediate. Velmore Kane's bioluminescent display shifted from orange to warm gold, and her rigid posture relaxed. How does that feel? Ben asked softly. Surprising, she admitted. I can sense your genuine care through the touch. It's like my worry becomes less important when I know someone else understands it. Ben stepped back and turned to the class. That's the power of compassionate physical contact. It's not about fixing someone's problems or giving them answers. It's about letting them know they're not facing their fears alone. The Etherian buzzed excitedly. But Teacher Ben, what about species that cannot touch safely? My energy form would be harmful to most biological beings. Great question, Ben replied. Physical touch is just one way to offer comfort. You could adjust your energy frequency to create calming resonance patterns. The silicanoids can share harmonic vibrations. The Draknari can use color displays to show support. The key isn't the method, it's the intention to help. One of the silicanoid students resonated with curiosity. Teacher Ben, we have heard that this approach has caused changes throughout the galactic community. Is this true? Ben smiled, thinking about the reports he'd been receiving from across known space. It's true. The human compassion protocol is being studied by species throughout the galaxy. Some civilizations are starting to modify their own cultural practices. He pulled up a holographic display showing recent communications from various worlds. The Andromedans have established comfort centers in their cities where citizens can receive emotional support. The Tau Cedians have added compassion training to their diplomatic education. Even the notoriously formal Rigelians have begun allowing physical contact during their medical treatments. Fillmore Kane's bioluminescence sparkled with excitement. And what about my people? What about the Zeltharians? Your people have been among the most enthusiastic adopters, Ben said warmly. Kira Velthane has become something of a celebrity, back on your homeworld. She's leading a movement to reform diplomatic protocols throughout the Zeltharian Empire. The door to the classroom chimed, and Kira Velthane herself entered, her robes glowing with warm blue and gold patterns. She had grown more confident over the past 6 months, and her bioluminescent displays now showed emotions more freely than any Zeltharian in recorded history. Teacher Ben, she said with a smile, I hope I'm not interrupting your lesson. Not at all, Ben replied. We were just talking about how your people have embraced compassionate contact. Kira Velthane turned to address the class. 6 months ago, I thought that following proper protocol was the most important thing in the universe. I believed that showing emotions or offering comfort outside of formal ceremonies was primitive and undignified. Her bioluminescent fibers shifted to show gentle humor. I was wrong. Since we've adopted human compassion practices, our society has become happier, more connected, and more peaceful. Crime rates have dropped. Mental health issues have decreased. Our people are forming deeper friendships and stronger family bonds. Seth raised a clawed hand. But Ambassador Kira Velthane, didn't some of your people resist these changes? Many did, she admitted. Change is difficult, especially when it challenges traditions that are thousands of years old. But we started slowly, with voluntary programs and education like this class. When people experienced the benefits of compassionate connection, most chose to embrace it. Ben watched his students absorb this information, seeing the excitement and hope in their various forms of expression. The galaxy is changing, he said. Species that haven't spoken to each other in centuries are starting to communicate again. Old conflicts are being resolved through understanding instead of force. The Etherean's atmosphere suit glowed brighter. Teacher Ben, do you think all species can learn to connect this way? I think every intelligent being has the capacity for compassion, Ben replied. It might be expressed differently across species, but the desire to help others and to be understood ourselves seems to be universal. Kira Velthane nodded. That's why we're expanding this program. Next year, we'll have cultural exchange stations in 50 star systems. We're training teachers from dozens of species to share these concepts with their own people. As the class period ended and the students began to leave, Fillmore Kane approached Ben one more time. Teacher Ben, may I ask you something personal? Of course. When you first hugged Ambassador Kira Velthane, did you know it would change everything? Ben considered the question seriously. No, I had no idea. I just saw someone who was scared and needed comfort. I did what felt right in that moment. So you changed galactic history by accident? Ben laughed. I guess you could say that, but maybe that's the point. The best acts of compassion aren't planned or calculated. They come from simply caring about other people and responding to their needs. As the students dispersed to their various living quarters, Ben remained in the classroom with Kira Velthane. Through the large viewing window, they could see ships from dozens of different species docked at the station, their crews learning about emotional connection and compassionate response. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had followed protocol that day? Kira Velthane asked. Ben shrugged. We probably would have had a perfectly proper diplomatic meeting, signed some formal agreements, and missed the real opportunity to understand each other. The galaxy is a warmer place because you chose kindness over rules, she said, her bioluminescent display showing deep gratitude mixed with affection. The galaxy is a better place because you were brave enough to question your own culture's limitations, Ben replied, and because you helped your people see that showing emotion isn't weakness, it's honesty.